Hello everybody, welcome to Module 10. My name is Megan Reach, and I can't believe it is November already. Today we will be talking about the critical, postmodern, and post-structuralist approaches to theory development. This is quite a big topic, so grab yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and we'll tackle it together. Quick little overview, so we're going to go into why. Why is this even important? Then we'll go back to the basics, looking at what is science, what is philosophy, what are the science and philosophical schools of thought. We'll take a look at what nursing's dominant historical worldview is. Then we'll look at the main topics, so postmodern, post-structuralist, and the critical approaches to theory development. At the very end, we'll hammer it home with a couple take-home points. So why is this even important? What is the importance of the different approaches to theory development anyways? So why? According to Silva and Rothbart in 2012, since every scientific theory is tied to some philosophical framework as the basis for understanding and assessing theory, it is important for the theorist within a given discipline to be aware of the discipline's philosophical orientation. We need to have an understanding of nursing's philosophical foundations. Because the philosophical orientation is actually the basis for a discipline to develop theory and advance knowledge, these philosophical worldviews are going to affect the knowledge development by changing the way one approaches the research. That's from McEwen. So going back to the basics. What is science? The information from this slide all comes from McEwen, 2018, pages 6 and 7. There are many definitions to what science is. Science is considered to be both a process and a product. As a process, science is a way of explaining phenomena and is a system of gathering, verifying, and systematizing information. As a product, science is going to be that empirical knowledge. There are many different ways to classify science. Some of the ways are basic science, human science, natural science, social science, and applied and practice sciences. With these classifications, they're not actually mutually exclusive. When you look at nursing, nursing is considered to be an applied or a practice science. But because these classifications are not mutually exclusive, we can see how nursing draws on like basic science and pure sciences like physiology and chemistry, and we also have characteristics of social sciences like psychology, sociology, and history. Everything in nursing, though, is applied to the real world. This is why we require a different orientation of philosophy and science than, say, chemistry does. Nursing's classification as an applied science is really important when one considers the philosophical worldviews. Philosophy. So Teichmann and Evans in 1999 defined philosophy as a study of problems that are ultimate, abstract, and general. These problems are concerned with the nature of existence, knowledge, morality, reason, and human purpose. There are many different branches of philosophy. There's metaphysics, like ontology, the study of the theory of being, cosmology, ethics, epistemology, the study of the ways of knowing. And then what we're going to focus on in this lecture is philosophy of science. So that kind of takes you all back to the first couple weeks of this course, doesn't it? So philosophies of science. According to McEwen, a philosophy of science is basically the worldview. It's the paradigm. They say there are the two most dominant worldviews are going to be your receive view and your perceive view. According to McEwen, postmodernism is also becoming another quite dominant worldview. So looking deeper at these philosophies of science, there's three categories, and in McEwen, they kind of are like umbrella terms. So under the umbrella of the receive view, there's empiricism, positivism, and logical positivism. In the perceive view, we have human science, phenomenology, I can't pronounce that one very well, constructivism, and historicism. Then there's also the umbrella of postmodernism, which encompasses post-structuralism and post-colonialism. So where do critical theories fit? According to McEwen in 2018, critical theories may be considered to be the perceive view. But according to Holmes and Gagnon in 2017, they say that post-structuralism is a critical theory, which would mean that if post-structuralism is a critical theory, then a critical theory would fit under the postmodernism category. So we can kind of get a sense of how there's many areas of disagreement when looking at the categorizations of philosophy and science. It depends on who you asked. This is table 1.3 from McEwen 2018, which compares the different views of sciences. So when we look at the hard sciences, or the received views, reality, truths, and facts are acontextual. So you can take the one truth, you can validate it, you can replicate it, and you can apply it to many different situations, because this one truth will be applicable no matter what the context is. In these hard sciences, you'll be using quantitative research methods. In the perceived view, or the soft sciences, this is going to be when the reality, truths, and facts are considered within a context. There are multiple truths. You can no longer take the one truth and apply it to a bunch of different situations, because in the perceived view, each situation is going to have its own truth. The reality, truths, and facts are considered to be with regard to history, and the methodology used in the perceived views of science is going to be your qualitative research methods. Then looking at postmodernism, post-structuralism, and post-colonialism, there's a contextual meaning to the reality, truth, and facts. They look at the narration. They look at and analyze facts according to the context, and the politics and structures that surround the concepts. The reality, truth, and facts are all going to be considered with regard to history. You're going to look at a bunch of different views, not only multiple truths, but opposing views as well. In postmodernism, post-structuralism, and post-colonialism, you're going to be using methodologic pluralism, which is your blending of both your quantitative and your qualitative research methodologies. So what was nursing's dominant historical worldview? So it's different in a couple different things, but basically it's going to be your scientific method, your logical empiricism, and logical positivism. According to Mary Silvana in 1977, she said, historically and traditionally, nurses have been indoctrinated into the singular approach to the derivation of nursing knowledge, the scientific method. The time has come to question this singular approach to the study of nursing knowledge. According to McEwen 2018, nursing was heavily influenced by logical empiricism and the scientific method when nursing first started developing as a scientific discipline back around the 1950s, which stretched into the 1970s. This is when quantitative research methods were highly preferred. The shift towards different worldviews began in about the 1980s, when nurses started to explore qualitative research methods. More recently, in the 1990s and the early 2000s, nurse scholars have called for theoretical and methodological pluralism in nursing philosophy and nursing science, which brought a rise to the postmodernism worldview in nursing. Now in the 2010s, nursing has multiple respected paradigms from which to choose to inform their theory and knowledge development. But according to Holmes and Gagnon in 2017, the scientific method still dominates knowledge development in nursing science. It informs the majority of research in our discipline. Page 4. Pretty interesting how both our historical worldview was the scientific method, and our current worldview is still quite heavily influenced by the scientific method. Alright, so I know that was a lot of background to get to this main topic, but going back to the basics and the histories of the approaches to theory development is truly crucial to aid the understanding of these three worldviews that we will be focusing on. Although there are other philosophical worldviews that have influenced nursing theory, both historically and today, these are the three we will focus on today. I wanted to start with a quote by Gannon and Davies in 2006, page 71. These labels, postmodernism, post-structuralism, and critical theories, are sometimes taken to refer to the same thing, and are sometimes taken up in oppositional ways. Further, what each of these names refers to is not an orderly, agreed on, and internally consistent set of ideas. What they mean depends on the vantage point from which the speaker or writing is being done. Among those who wear each of these labels, there are many interesting and productive divisions, which are ignored when they are lumped together under one collective noun. I wanted to start with that quote because as I was doing my research for each of these three different philosophies of science, I found that the literature did not always agree on the definitions and descriptions of each one. There are many variances and often conflicting information given. The information I will present to you was what most of the authors in the literature were in agreement over. We're going to start with postmodernism. So according to Holmes and Wehrlo 2000, page 90, postmodernists reject, to varying degrees, the traditional monolithic notions of truth and rationality in favor of pluralistic ways of knowing. Their statements, therefore, reflect a concern for context rather than universality, specificity rather than generalization, uniqueness rather than sameness, and relativism rather than absolutism. Postmodernism started in 1960 in Europe as a social movement among French literary theorists. It rejects the idea of a single truth, instead focusing on multiple meanings of reality. A focus of causality is also rejected in postmodernism. Postmodernism looks at the context of the truth. There is importance of the practical significance and relevance of research finding, instead of a single universally applied truth. Postmodernism promotes the use of multiple methods for the development of knowledge, and it incorporates different ways of knowing to improve the understanding of human nature. This is when your mixed methodology is going to come into play. Postmodernism in nursing became the dominant scientific theoretical paradigm in nursing in the late 20th century. According to Sajidar, Balneves, and Thorne in 2001, nurse scholars began to want to move beyond the reductionist worldviews that were focusing on a single truth, like the scientific method, to yield to a postmodern approach with emphasis on multiple and subjective truths to conceptualize science as a human and creative enterprise. This approach was sought out because of the inadequacies of the scientific method and empiricism to deal with the phenomena and the pluralism in nursing as an applied and human science. It's pretty interesting too because we can actually see where postmodernism began to become the most dominant paradigm. During the subjective and procedural knowledge stages, the development of theories were focused around grand theories, which are broad and able to be applied to many different situations. Then, as the shift was more to postmodernism, during the constructed knowledge stage in the 1990s and early 2000s, the shift was more in developing middle theories and practice theories, which are more specific and are contextually based. All of that's also continuing into today. Nursing is pluralistic, and so is postmodernism, so they can be a pretty good fit together. According to Reid in 2012, postmodernism has engaged nursing in a dialogue to reconcile a basic awareness about the uniqueness and differences in human beings and health. And as we've talked about a couple times, postmodernism is credited with helping blend qualitative and quantitative research methods into a single holistic model. There are some criticisms and limitations of postmodernism in nursing. One is not having truth as the regulatory ideal. So according to Sajidar, Balneves, and Thorne in 2001, without truth as the regulatory ideal, there is no set of standards against which to evaluate the development of nursing knowledge. That's basically meaning that they're failing to strive towards some theoretical notion of truth. Even if a notion of truth is understood as unachievable, it makes it difficult for a practice science such as nursing to actually evaluate our nursing knowledge. So how do we know if a nursing theory is actually a nursing theory if we don't have some overarching truth of what nursing theory is? How do we verify this knowledge? So that's a pretty interesting limitation. And also there's a criticism that postmodernism doesn't recognize grand theories as valid. As we talked about in the previous slide, postmodernism doesn't like to generalize. Knowledge is context-based, so it shouldn't be able to be applied in a multitude of situations as grand theories are. Moving on to post-structuralism. So Durzek in 1989, page 76, said, "Post-structuralistic thought encourages us to look beyond what we know to focus on the forces that limit what we know." So post-structuralism was developed by French philosophers in the 1960s and the 1970s. It critiques and challenges the way we perceive reality. Post-structuralism is based in context and perspective, so our understanding of a phenomena is a matter of perspective and is not based on absolute truth. One famous post-structuralist is Michel Foucault. To learn about him, take a peek at that video that was posted by Dr. Campbell. Foucault's work has been very influential in analyzing the relationships between power, knowledge, discourse, and practice. Post-structuralism looks at how power and language affects the production of knowledge, and that's a pretty significant point there, the power and language. Post-structuralism also deconstructs known truths. So you wouldn't be just reading a piece of literature and taking the knowledge gleaned from that at face value. In a post-structuralist view, you'd be looking at what language do they use, who is writing it, what power do they hold. So you're going to deconstruct those known truths. According to Henneman in 1995, the view of the post-structuralist is that the ultimate way to understand is to have no structures imposed on the investigator. Power is really important. It determines all that can or will be known. It is maintained in all levels of social hierarchy through day-to-day interactions of involved individuals. In post-structuralism, power both limits and produces knowledge. In nursing, post-structuralism provides a perspective to maintain an openness to multiple paradigms. It also encourages nurse scholars to focus on not only on the content of the questions asked, but on the political and metaphysical assumptions, such as language and power, that are going to structure and limit that content in nursing. Post-structuralists also have an aware of the limitations of paradigms. So they actually talk about how one paradigm is not superior over another. Any method of inquiry is acceptable as long as it fits the context of the problems at hand. The post-structuralistic perspective suggests that multiple paradigms are necessary for the development of nursing science and nursing knowledge. The post-structuralist perspective is promising for nursing as a collaborative discipline. If nursing is no longer limited by the traditional definitions of science, which have been propagated by knowledge and power structures, then alternative ways of knowing can be recognized as legitimate forms of investigation, according to Henneman in 1995. Okay, critical theory. So Brown 2000, page 39, stated, "By explaining and critiquing the social order, critical social science serves as a catalyst for enlightenment, empowerment, emancipation, and social transformation. Critically oriented knowledge should offer social or cultural critiques with a view to transform normative foundations that maintain status quo." Critical theory originated out of the theoretical tradition of the Frankfurt School of Social Research in the 1920s to the 1930s. It recognizes the influence of gender, culture, society, and shared history as being essential components of science. Critical theory assumes that truth is socially determined and shaped by social, political, cultural, economical, ethnic, and gender values. In critical theory, you're not interested in developing knowledge just for knowledge's sake, but you're actually aiming for knowledge to have a transformative outcome. Social justice. You want to address injustices. The topic of advocacy is central in critical theory. In nursing, you see critical theories under critical social theory, or CST. The interest in CST as a philosophical orientation began in the early 1980s. According to Brown, critically orientated science should produce emancipatory knowledge that promotes social change and a more just society. They use CST to address the oppressive socio-political conditions that affect inequities in health and healthcare. As nurses, we all know how there's those social determinants of health, and how socioeconomic status determines how healthy an individual will be. CST wants to address the determinants of health through a nursing lens. An application of CST is through participatory action research, or PAR. PAR is used to stimulate community involvement by having researchers and community members work collaboratively to develop a solution for health-related problems or needs in a particular community. Another application of critical theory in nursing is seen in feminism. So feminism says that gender relations must be analyzed within the specific socio-cultural and historical contexts. Similar to critical social theory, gender is seen as a central form of oppression and as a determinant of health. As nursing is primarily a female-based occupation or discipline, the feminist perspective has relevance for nurses to fully develop and exercise their professional role. Alright, so we'll just compare the worldviews here. It's a little confusing as to how these worldviews are truly different from each other, and that makes sense because each of these worldviews, postmodernism, poststructuralism, and critical theories, they're all critiques of positivism. They're all critiques of the scientific method. So they are going to have some similarities, and the concepts within them have some definite links. In this chart, I just comprised it by using those bolded terms I had throughout my PowerPoints. So with postmodernism, I'd highlighted that there's multiple truths, there's a context of the truth, and that multiple methods are used to develop knowledge. In poststructuralism, I highlighted that there's a critique of reality. Poststructuralists want to deconstruct already known truths. They specifically want to look at the effect of power and language on the development and dissemination of knowledge, and they're very open to having multiple paradigms. In the critical theories, the truth is socially determined and influenced by gender, culture, society, and shared history. The research should promote an actual social change and emancipatory knowledge, and advocacy is a central theme in the critical theories. Alright, some take-home points now. Thorne and Varvo in 1998 stated, "One is neither inherently more true than the other, but each applicable on its own terms and in its own context." I think that statement really wraps up the importance of having multiple paradigms in nursing. There's not one that's better or more true than the other, but every paradigm is applicable to its own context and in its own situation. So the critical, postmodern, and poststructuralism, they're all different approaches to theory development. One's theoretical orientation shapes how research and knowledge is developed. Knowledge development within a discipline proceeds from several philosophical and scientific perspectives or worldviews. The biggest take-home point is that there is value in all of the different ways of generating knowledge. And here's my references that I used. Alright, thank you guys very much for listening to this presentation. I will post my discussion questions on the post that you see this YouTube video on, and I'm excited for the discussions this week. Thanks for listening. Take care.